In this world, everyone has a countdown on their arm, and when the timer reaches 0, they die instantly. Though genetic modification has frozen everyone's physical age at 25, to continue living, people must constantly earn more time, as time is the only currency in the future. People earn time, spend time, and while the rich can live forever, the poor must struggle daily just to survive. Will has grown up in the slums, waking each day with less than a day's worth of time on his clock. He lives with his mother, who, despite being 50 years old, still looks 25. Today is his mother's 50th birthday, and Will had worked extra hours the previous day to buy a bottle of champagne. However, there is no time for celebration today. After paying rent and utility bills, they have very little time left. Even so, Will's mother gives him half an hour to have breakfast before she leaves. After saying goodbye, Will rushes out to buy breakfast, only to find that prices have gone up again. Now, even a regular cup of coffee costs 4 minutes. As Will reaches out to the time machine, the time is instantly deducted from his account. In this world, it's common to see people arm wrestling for time, using time as the stakes in these deadly games. Losing all their time means immediate death, but Will is used to it. In this harsh reality, the poor must constantly work to earn enough time to keep themselves alive. The next morning, Will discovers that his time hasn't increased after receiving his paycheck. The company has raised its work quotas, and since Will didn't meet the new targets, he has to work overtime. After a grueling day, Will heads to a bar to meet his friend. His friend tells him that a wealthy man, who has over a century of time on his arm, is at the bar tonight, buying drinks for everyone. Curious, Will looks over, but instead of the rich man, he first notices someone else, someone eyeing the wealthy man suspiciously. Will quickly warns the rich man that someone is after his time, but before he can finish, time bandits burst into the bar. The customers scatter in panic, and it's clear the bandits are there to rob the wealthy man of his time. Surprisingly, the wealthy man remains calm. He tells the bandits to wait until he's done vomiting, and then he'll give them his time. He stumbles off to the bathroom, but as he vomits, Will seizes the opportunity and rushes in, helping the rich man escape. They flee to an abandoned building, and once they're safe, Will questions the rich man about why he flaunted his time, putting himself in danger. The rich man, now calm, reveals the harsh truth of their world. For a few to live forever, many must die. If everyone were immortal, there would be no room for new generations. So, the wealthy control taxes and prices to maintain a high mortality rate in the ghettos, ensuring the system stays in balance. Time is a finite resource, and for the rich to enjoy eternal life, they must continuously drain the poor of their time. Will is shocked by this revelation. The wealthy man then poses a question to him, one that will change Will's view of the world forever. Will glanced down at his watch, noticing the dwindling time on his arm. After a moment of reflection, he replied, "What's the point of having all the time in the world if you're too afraid to live?" Will stared out the window, his eyes catching a glimpse of a message etched into the glass by the wealthy man, "Don't waste my time." The weight of those words hung heavily on Will's mind. He realized the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders, with a century of time on his arm and the opportunity to make a difference. As he looked out over the sprawling city, he knew his life had just changed in a way he could never have imagined. Will saw the wealthy man sitting by the edge of the bridge and immediately rushed over. However, he was too late. As the countdown on the man's arm reached 0, the wealthy man convulsed briefly before falling into the river below. By the time Will reached the bridge, the man was already lying lifeless in the water. Stunned and unsure of what to do next, Will was overwhelmed with emotion. He quickly sought out his best friend and told him everything that had happened. His friend, concerned for Will's safety, urged him to keep a low profile. In their impoverished district, having so much time was not just a luxury, it was a dangerous liability. After some contemplation, Will decided to leave 10 years of his newfound time with his friend. Then, he bought a bouquet of flowers and went to the bus stop where his mother usually got off, planning to surprise her. However, his mother was facing an unexpected crisis. That day, the bus fare had suddenly increased, doubling from 1 hour to 2 hours. Now, she didn't have enough time left to pay for the ride. Will's mother pleaded with the bus driver, promising that someone would meet her at the station to cover the remaining fare. However, not a single person on the bus was willing to help her. Left with no other option, she began to sprint home. Meanwhile, when Will didn't see his mother get off the bus, he quickly realized something might have gone wrong. Without hesitation, he started running in the direction she would have taken. Both of them were racing against time on the street. Finally, they caught sight of each other. His mother immediately extended her hand, and Will sprinted even faster, desperately reaching out to her. However, just as they embraced, the countdown on his mother's arm reached 0. She died in Will's arms, and he broke down in tears, overwhelmed with grief. At that moment, his eyes were filled with hatred. Will silently vowed to himself that he would make those who created this system pay for what they had done. In the future, it was illegal for the wealthy to run, as they had all the time in the world to enjoy life. Luckily, Will reacted quickly and stopped himself just in time, understanding how the rich viewed time so differently. Ever since his mother died in his arms, Will vowed to break the rules set by the rich. Determined to challenge the system, Will decided to take a taxi to the wealthy district. Along the way, he encountered numerous checkpoints, each requiring a hefty toll to pass. The contrast between the wealthy district and the impoverished area was striking. The rich area was a world apart, with beautiful surroundings and towering skyscrapers, sights Will had never seen before. After Will got out of the taxi, he instinctively started running, only to attract curious glances from those around him. It dawned on him that with his newfound wealth of over 100 years, he didn't need to rush anymore. His unusual behavior caught the attention of a young woman who had never seen someone run to save time before. Upon reaching the hotel, Will immediately booked the most luxurious suite available. He was determined to adapt to the lifestyle of the wealthy. However, despite his efforts to fit in, his hasty eating habits and overall demeanor made him stand out and seemed out of place among the refined guests. As evening fell, Will arrived at the Royal Casino, where just the entry fee amounted to a year's worth of time. Coming from the impoverished zone, Will was only familiar with card games, and he soon found himself at a high-stakes table. His opponent, the head of the time bank with over 10,000 years of time, began with a bet of 50 years. Will, feeling cornered, matched the bet. When the opponent raised the stakes by an additional 200 years, Will noticed the subtle signs of deception. Determined, he decided to go all in, betting every last second of his time and leaving himself with only 30 seconds. If he lost, he would face immediate death. Fortunately, as the dealer revealed the cards, Will won the game, securing over 1,000 years' worth of time. His reckless gamble left a strong impression on the time bank president, who was stunned by Will's audacity. The president invited Will to attend a banquet he was hosting the next day. The girl who had been observing Will throughout the day was actually the president's daughter, Ava. In order to attend the party, he spent another 60 years to buy a sports car. When Will arrived at the president's mansion, he was greeted by 3 stunning women at the entrance. As the president introduced them, Will learned that they were the president's mother-in-law, wife, and daughter. This is how rich people live. Time has not left any traces on them. During the dinner, Ava approached Will. She had already guessed that Will came from the poor district, but Ava bore him no ill will. In fact, she admired Will's life, as he had the courage to do what he wanted, unlike her, who had to follow strict rules in everything she did. These are the rules the rich must follow to ensure their longevity. Seeing this, Will took Ava outside the villa, where a vast blue ocean stretched before them. It was Will's first time seeing the sea. Without hesitation, he stripped off his clothes and jumped into the water. Ava, initially shocked by Will's spontaneous act, hesitated for a moment, but eventually followed him into the sea. It was the first time she had broken the rules set by her parents. As they swam together, an unusual and profound emotion began to envelop them. Unexpectedly, the bank's president also found them there. Will and Ava quickly returned to the villa. However, before Will could even catch his breath, the police arrived. They had discovered through surveillance that Will had been present at the scene of the wealthy man's death. Given that Will had arrived in the affluent district with a large amount of time, they suspected him of being the murderer. Will tried to explain that the time was a gift from the wealthy man, but the police were not convinced. They found it hard to believe that anyone would voluntarily give up their chance at eternal life, and they were indifferent to justice. He knew that such time shouldn't belong to a poor person. The police confiscated all of Will's time, leaving him only 2 hours to complete the arrest procedure. Seeing that even the police would not uphold justice, Will seized a weapon from one of the officers and took Ava hostage. Her identity as the president's daughter made the bodyguards hesitate to act. Will managed to escape from the villa, but the time police quickly gave chase. On the street, amidst a high-speed pursuit, Will's desperate running allowed them to ultimately evade the police. Later, Will immediately took Ava to the poor district. However, just at that moment, roadblocks suddenly appeared ahead. They had an accident as their car crashed. Their car lost control and crashed into the roadblocks. It turned out they had run into time thieves. When they came to, Ava had only half an hour left. Fortunately, they were close to the outskirts. Will immediately took Ava and ran as fast as he could, hoping to find his friend to get more time. However, he discovered that after receiving 10 years of time, his friend was now at the bar, continuing his revelry. Will was deeply regretful, realizing that his good intentions had inadvertently led to his friend's death. Now, with only 2 minutes left, he and Ava were in a desperate situation. As Ava was at a loss, Will noticed that the earring she was wearing was a diamond. They quickly went to a pawn shop, where the diamond was exchanged for 2 days of time. With some time secured, Will then forced Ava to call her father, just as the time police were also at the chairman's place. Will told the chairman that if he agreed to pay 1,000 years, Ava would be safe to return home the next day. However, despite having immense wealth, the chairman hesitated to meet the ransom demand. During the wait for the ransom, Will and Ava got to know each other better. Ava realized that Will wasn't a bad person, and Will discovered that Ava was actually a good girl. By the next day, it was clear that the chairman hadn't given up the 1,000 years of time. Will decided to release Ava, giving her a weapon for protection. Despite their brief time together, Ava had already fallen in love with this brave and kind-hearted man. Ava immediately called her father, who refused to pay the ransom. Through this conversation, she realized her father's cold-bloodedness and lack of compassion. During their call, the time police tracked them down. Seeing that Will hadn't yet noticed the danger, Ava, in a desperate move, shot the time police, who fell immediately. With the situation escalating, Will decided to rob the time police, and then they drove away. Once they had escaped, they saw on TV that they were now wanted criminals. This was Ava's first encounter with the harsh realities of their society. She and Will agreed to dismantle the rules and rebuild societal order. They decided to rob the rich to help the poor, and after learning how to use weapons, they began their new mission. They first robbed wealthy passers-by, and as they gained experience, they set their sights on the time bank. From the bank, they stole a large amount of time and distributed it among the poor, rather than keeping it for themselves. However, their frequent crimes quickly led the police to track their location. One night, as the two were preparing to play cards, the time police quietly arrived outside. Fortunately, Will remained vigilant, and they escaped through a broken window. Despite their escape, the time police did not give up the chase. Will, utilizing his knowledge of the poor district's layout, led Ava through alleys and rooftops. Just as the police were closing in on them, they managed to escape in a car. To remain hidden, the two rented out an entire restaurant. However, they were soon located by the time bandits, who were envious of the large amount of time they had recently stolen. In typical villain fashion, the time bandits chose to challenge Will to a fair fight rather than just shooting him on sight. At first, Will pretended to be outmatched and lost all his time. When the countdown on his wrist appeared, the bandits let their guard down, thinking Will was defeated. Seizing the opportunity, Will began his counterattack. The sudden reversal of fortunes caught everyone's attention. As the bandits' time dwindled to 0, Will decisively drew his weapon, prepared to finish the fight. Will take out his gun and killed everybody. Later, they escaped to the rooftop. However, they saw that the wealthy had raised prices once again. Will immediately realized that no matter how much time they stole, as long as the rich kept increasing the cost of living, the poor would continue to be exploited. The time they had stolen would not significantly impact the wealthy. Ava then asked how long it would take to hurt them. Will replied that only if they could steal 1,000,000 years would they be able to make a significant impact. Ava thought for a moment and then mentioned that she knew where such a vast amount of time was located. The next day, Ava pretended to surrender to her father while Will disguised himself as a bodyguard and took the bank's president hostage. When they accessed the bank vault, they found a time machine holding 1,000,000 years worth of time. As they prepared to take the time, the bank president warned that if the poor received 1,000,000 years, the current social system would collapse. While it might disrupt this generation's order, someone would always seek immortality, and the cost of eternal life could only be paid by sacrificing others. Eventually, society would return to its current state. At that moment, Will spoke up. As they prepared to take the time machine, the time police discovered their location. To prevent the time from reaching the poor, the police issued a shoot-to-kill order. Fortunately, Will had also seized the president's armored car, which allowed him to blast through the roadblocks with its superior protection. When Will returned to the impoverished area, he immediately distributed all the time he had collected to the poor. The time police quickly tracked them down. Will had no choice but to keep fleeing with Eva, but the time police caught up with them. However, Will wasn't worried, as he had only a few minutes left on his timer. The police realized that to arrest them, they would first need to extend their own time. At that moment, one of the officers glanced down at his own arm. The police himself was out of time and died. In the final moments, Will and Eva, facing the imminent zeroing of their time, spotted a police car with a time machine nearby. They ran desperately towards the car. Will reached it first, replenished his time, and then rushed back to Eva, determined not to let her die in his arms again. With Will's relentless effort, they managed to escape just in time. The two lovers embraced tightly, having narrowly avoided disaster. In the end, the distribution of the 1 million years' worth of time among the impoverished led to the collapse of the boundary between the rich and poor zones. Even the time police gave up their role in guarding time. Will and Eva continued their mission of redistributing wealth, becoming time bandits dedicated to upholding fairness and justice in society.